All right, welcome guys as we get seated here for the webinar. We're just kind of giving you guys some time to get in and get settled before we get started. So welcome everybody. Just going to give this another 15-30 seconds in case there's any stragglers trying to join the webinar. All right, cool. Well, welcome everybody. Week 2 of our webinar series. My name's Jake. You may know me as the host with the Trost. I'm here with Peter Trost. We're both from Energy Circle, and just happy to be here sharing some marketing knowledge with you. Feel free during this webinar if you have any questions at all. We want to make sure they're addressed, so you can ask them in the Q&A bar down kind of at the bottom. I believe it's at the bottom of the screen. And if it's appropriate for me to interrupt Peter at that time and kind of address it now, then we'll do it. If not, we'll save it for the end. We'll make sure we get to any questions. But we love keeping this interactive, so don't to ask your queries. Outside of that, I'm just going to pass it off to Cooper to give us an intro here and kind of let us all know why we're here. So take it away, Cooper.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Thanks, Jake and Peter, for putting together this webinar. My name is Cooper Thompson. I'm from Efficiency Vermont. One of our goals in working with folks in the EEN is to provide you all with training opportunities. Probably a lot of folks are familiar with some of the technical trainings we'll help folks with that get a little bit more into the specifics of Efficiency Vermont programs and products that Efficiency Vermont supports. But we also want to provide everyone with some additional tools to help their business in general as well. And certainly being in the EEN is a great way to differentiate yourself, and everyone's got access to the EEN portal, which we see folks that keep that updated, see a little bit more traffic from the Efficiency Vermont website, and everyone's out there doing great work, which we certainly appreciate. The hope today is pretty much to give everyone some more tools for their tool belt and help kind of guide some of their digital marketing strategy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Peter.
Great. Thanks a lot, Cooper. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. Those of you who came back for a second try, thank you. And those of you who are new, appreciate you being here. Both of these, by the way, last week's session and today's session are being recorded, and we're going to get them up on the Efficiency Vermont site probably tomorrow. If not, it'll be kind of early next week, but we're going to get it tomorrow. So you'll have all this stuff to your heart's content. So briefly, if you didn't hear this last week, if we aren't connected via whatever your preference is, or you want to reach out to me in any fashion based on anything I say today or afterwards, love to connect. Easy to find. Peter at Energy Circle gets to me, and then Energy Circle is pretty easily found throughout the interwebs. Just to point out, we do a webinar pretty much every Wednesday for half an hour. Obviously, a sort of more of a subtopic than we'll deal with more globally today, but something super relevant. Usually, those are good for BPI CEUs. They're kind of short and sweet and quite popular. So and no charge. So feel free to join those. Again, just in case anybody wasn't here for the last week, the credential with which I bring to the discussion today is that Energy Circle is a marketing firm working exclusively for what we describe as the better buildings sector. So companies in mechanical and envelope, both retrofit and new construction, as well as in renewables that are working to improve the built environment. That's our mission, and we basically decided to exact our mission through more successful contractors. That's how we decided to do it. We work across the country, a little bit in Canada as well, have lots and lots of insight into different business models and different ways people are doing things, all kinds of program conditions and climate zones and so forth, and a huge data set to do it. So that's sort of the basis on which I talked today. So last week, this is sort of what we covered, a little bit of COVID, and I want to do that again today. The core fundamentals of what it means to be marketing in this world of either high performance or home performance, whatever you want to term it. We talked about the economics, what you should pay for a lead, and most importantly, what you should pay all the way through to the final acquisition of that customer. And then we talked specifically about this idea of a digital foundation. So we sort of split the sort of two sides of marketing into these two sides. One is a strong digital foundation, and then the other, which is today's topic, is active lead generation. And the key point I want to make about this is that both of these will generate leads, right? A strong digital foundation, particularly one that gets very mature, a mature website that is consistently driving traffic, all of these kinds of things, will be a consistent lead driver over time. It is not, depending on where you start from, right? And sometimes I like to use we're climbing a mountain, and the question is, how far up are you to start the summit, the drive to the summit? Depending on how far up you are, will dictate how quickly an investment or an effort into the foundation will pay off, right? Whereas most of the things we're going to talk about today are fairly instantaneous, right? You can turn on Google ads, you can turn on Facebook ads, and in some relatively short period of time, things will start to happen, right? So the decision that you individually as companies might make about, do I put my effort more into my foundation? Do I put more into my lead generation is very much a immediacy kind of question. We strongly advocate building up that digital foundation because it becomes an annuity. It pays off long term. But if you don't have enough leads today or next week to satisfy your goals, then you probably need to be shifting a little bit more towards active things. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So today's, 5 big topics that I want to go into are Google My Business, and we talked about that both as a foundation thing as well as, as a lead gen thing, and I'll explain why. We're going to talk about paid search. We're going to talk about a particular type of Google product called local services ads that some of you may be participating in, also sometimes known as the Google Guaranteed program. And then I want to talk about video marketing and Facebook marketing as well. So that's the game plan. And as Jake said, fire your questions in. He's authorized to interrupt me at any time. And if it's relevant to what we're talking about in the moment, we can just take the question right then and there. Before we start in, I wanted to just do a quick, update and this is probably more an update on what Peter is thinking about over the course of the last week. And I wanted to just say that I think we're in a unique opportunity now around a topic that many of us have, committed to, but has been a challenging sell for a lot of folks in our industry, and that is whole house ventilation, right? And so the reason that I am, thinking that there is fundamental change is that there has just been enormous attention and press coverage to the whole question of indoor air quality in the era of COVID, and major media is covering this. There is this growing recognition about, in particular, about the fact that the virus can be airborne indoors, that it maintains itself in an aerosol form, and that it's particularly now as we're going back to school, and there's an enormous amount of discussion going on about ventilation in schools and how to try to make them safe. And of course, Efficiency Vermont's doing a lot on that. There's a special program that if you don't already know about that, there's some really good incentives, and I would definitely recommend looking into that if you do any kind of work at the school level. But with all this growing awareness, I'm making a little bit of a bet here that this is going to flow our way in terms of people starting to have the same exact thought about residential and their homes as is happening in office buildings and schools and so forth. And so, we all are kind of coming around to the recognition that being outside and still being masked when in close quarters is relatively safe in comparison to being indoors. And that just translates to me logically into how do we make the inside of our homes more like the outside in terms of the flushing factors of airflow and so forth. The three kind of big narratives I think that are going on right now are, number one, what I just said, which is growing recognition that it's airborne and it lingers. There's a lot of press out there, and some of it's not particularly well, let's say well steeped in building science. That air conditioning may just be spreading it around the house, right? And that will become true when we close up and it becomes fall, which is right on top of us when we close up and so forth. And then the third major thing, and this is really most homeowners at the moment are thinking about one thing, and we know this from a lot of Google Trends data, is the first thing they tend to think about is purification. And there is massive amounts of search, some of the search volumes for purification search related terms have absolutely exploded over the course of this. I mean, Google has this category of breakout volume, and breakout means the search term has grown by more than 5,000%. And so what's happening around purification is that there is enormous sort of questioning of, does this work for coronavirus? Secondly, all kinds of search about different technologies, et cetera, pure, UV and so forth, and then all kinds of search for specific brands. And so the bottom line, though, is that what that data shows is that people are massively confused about this. And they think purification first. They aren't necessarily thinking ventilation first, but they're massively confused about it. And so, what unfortunately is not quite in recognition yet, but I think is coming, and that's kind of why I'm making this bet, like I'm all in, is that proper ventilation is the solution. Which I think requires us as an industry to shift the narrative. We tend to think about whole house ventilation in the context of this very cool piece of technology that uses heat transfer to make the bringing of fresh air into a building more energy efficient. So we talk about them as, do you have an HRV or an ERV, rather than talking about them in terms of, do you have a fresh air system? And some of you may remember this project that Sam Rashkin at DOE initiated back in the day, the so-called Building America building science translator. So it was just trying to bring accessible human language to what we in the kind of building science community kind of geekily talk about, whether it's HRV or whole house ventilation or supply only or exhaust only or balanced or Sam's kind of advice here. Call it a fresh air system. Call it, and I really do think that now is the time. So that's my little mini soapbox of what's on my mind most in the course of the last week around the sort of shifting sands of our current environment. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and so forth. Okay, so first up in these active lead generation opportunities is Google My Business, and I just want to emphasize that we talked about this a little bit last week because this is both a foundational thing, but the reason I wanted to talk more in detail about it today is that, as you'll see from a couple of data slides, we're finding that Google My Business is generating an enormous amount of traffic, right? And it's some cases, as many as 50% of the inquiries coming either by telephone or some other method are coming from are traceable to Google My Business. So that's why this has become so incredibly important. So just to be clear what we're talking about, Google My Business is this is this system in which you can control your listing and put a lot of information in about your listing. Where it shows up is when somebody searches for your company name, right? They saw your truck, they go to the internet and they search for your company name. You'll get what would typically happen is something like on the left, right? Where, so this, I searched for a company called Ideal Energy. You get all the organic results in the left-hand column, and in the right-hand column, you get the Google Knowledge Panel, all of which is, all the information from which is coming out of Google My Business. So that's what we mean by company search, and I'll show you in just a second what that looks like in mobile. The other type is when someone searches for a service, and they get the so-called local pack, right? That sort of map listing, the local pack that always has 3 companies in it. That is what we call a service search. But both of those are heavily driven by Google My Business. So the question that, I think I want all of you to be thinking about is when you do that brand search for yourself, when you look at your company, ask yourself what story is told by this particular page, and just remember, you scan this one for energy, for Ideal Energy, both the left-hand column organic and the right-hand column Google Knowledge Panel. There's just an enormous amount of information. Their website, their ratings, 59 5-star average reviews on Yelp. 14 votes, 5 stars on Facebook, et cetera. You scan down this thing and you can see an enormous amount of information. Same thing over in the panel. And so what's happening, because so much information is available here, is that many people are making the decision to contact a company from this page without ever visiting a website. And it's what's becoming known as the zero-click the zero-click internet. So that's what's happening, is that more and more there's a ton of information here, and people don't necessarily have to click through to your website in order to get that. And I'll show you a little bit of data on just what I mean by that. To be clear, when you do this in mobile, this Google My Business information is even more dominant, and there's a bunch of features in here that I'll talk about in just a second. This is what I mean by volume. So this is one of our clients. This is a quarter's worth of time, so 3 months, almost 1,000 sort of leads in this case, and split between people who click and visit the website and people who pick up the telephone and call you. 43% in this case, not quite half, but getting there, chose to just pick up the phone from from Google My Business. We know this from tracking, and just call directly without ever visiting the website. So while we tend to focus a lot on this idea of brand search, meaning that they knew your company name and they were sort of searching for you that way, what's happening over time is that the number of service term searches, what Google calls discovery, so in this case the blue part of the chart, are increasingly driving things. So these are the terms. If you look on the right-hand column, it's insulation company, insulation, energy audit, insulation companies in Phoenix, AC companies, Phoenix, et cetera. So a growing amount of traffic is coming from that, from that particular thing. A few new things, and it's important to say that Google My Business is in a lot of flux. I'm going to show you something in just a minute that's brand new that showed up yesterday. But Google is putting a lot of effort into this Google My Business product. After all those of you may kind of remember the crazy years of Google Places and Google Plus, their sort of failed attempt at a social network and so forth. And us as sort of small businesses being caught up in all of that, they really have landed on Google My Business as their core entry into the entire world of small businesses. And so this product called Google My Business is changing all the time. Some of you may have these interactive capabilities. So in other words, there's messaging directly in Google My Business. Some cases you might have access to request a quote. And what we're finding with folks who have tried this, have really started to generate, a fair amount of traffic from the request a quote. I want to say a little bit about service areas because this has changed in the beginning. Typically, what people did to define their service area was a radius around their physical business location. So you said, all right, we're willing to serve 40 miles from where our office is, for example. That radius is no more, but in its place, you have the ability to really sculpt your specific service area by either choosing an entire state as an example here, or choosing all the way down to a specific zip code, or you can choose a county, or you can choose a town. And so any of these things goes. And so if you have if you have a fairly tight geography, you can use this to do a better job. And the point of this is that if the more focused you can be about your service area, the more likely you are to be able to kind of win within that. If you said, look, I want to try, if you use Vermont as as for the entire state, the competitive set you're going up against is much greater than if you say Chittenden County, right? So this is important and a good chance, a really good way to signify to Google in a super important way exactly what the precise boundary of your service area is. Categories are incredibly important in Google My Business. There is no single signal to Google more important than the choices you make in terms of which categories to put yourself in. There are a fair number of categories in overall HVAC. Really, for those of you who are more on the building envelope side, there are not that many choices. It's insulation contractor for the most part. You can see air duct cleaning service. The key thing is, there's 10 places to list yourself. If it's appropriate, use them all. Very important to choose which one to be first, right? And because that primary one is the one that shows and the one that has kind of the most weight, that primary category. But a key point is that you can change it out seasonally. So if you're, on the HVAC side, you're currently, maybe you've got air conditioning contractor up there as your category. You might, as the fall starts to hit and the temperature starts to change, you'll probably want to think about switching that over to heating. So, but again, don't take them away, just change out what's in that very first position. But again, super important. And by the way, these categories are pretty, I wouldn't say constantly changing, but they are changing. For the longest time in solar, the only thing that existed was solar energy equipment supplier. And now we've got solar energy contractor and solar energy company. So there are changes happening. There's no energy audit. There's no home performance. So it's not perfect, but there is some hope.
PT, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
We had just a couple of questions actually regarding GMB and actually reviews. So before you move on,
okay.
From Gwen, she's asking, would you say that the results from Google My Business is true for architecture as well as contractor businesses? Architecture being a more image-driven.
Yeah, really good question. And I don't know, Gwen, I guess is the quick answer on that. I haven't spent enough time looking specifically at, at that. But again, I think, it makes a certain amount of sense. I think that, someone searching for your firm, right, would get that similar branded result. And then I suspect there's an equal amount of story in that result for an architect as there is. Important to note, and I think I may have a slide on this, or maybe not, but in that knowledge panel, you do have a fair amount of, you have full control over photography, and people don't take it seriously enough. And so in architecture, obviously super important to take it very seriously, but it's true really for everybody to make sure that, you've got the beauty shots. If you do nothing, it's often going to be the default image from the little, Google car that drives by. So it's like, a picture of your dumpster or something. So that's it. It's a good question though. And you prompted me to sort of look more into the architecture category.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jake, or?
We've got one about reviews.
Yeah.
I'm curious if if the content of reviews can benefit from SEO/keyword searches, are there best practices for getting customers to use specific words in those reviews?
Yeah, really, really good question, and I'll answer it because we didn't really have a section on that today. So one of the things we talked a little bit about last week was this idea that review content tends to fall into two buckets, right? It's the Sally was awesome bucket, right? Which is a review that's all about the particular person that came into the house and is very much about the quality of the service, right? The other type of review is one that says, you know, Sally came in and did a fantastic job insulating my attic and installing heat pumps, right? So there is kind of more substance. So those keywords are, you know, whatever keywords are in there. And I'm not saying that you know, it's great to have the term heat pump in one of your reviews. It's also great to have the term excellent job in your reviews. So both of them are equally important, but we always are trying to do everything we can, especially since, you know, so many of our services are not, you know, are not the kinds of things that we would typically think, you know, things like home performance and whole house and ventilation that are not standard search terms. You want people telling those stories. The best practice that we have found is in the process of making the request, prompt people to answer certain questions. In other words, we are particularly interested in your feedback on how we did installing the heat pump, or we are particularly interested in your feedback on how comfortable your home was after the services were delivered. So if you give people a prompt, number one, it makes it easier for the person to write the review and to write a more substantive review. And then secondly, it'll guide them a little bit more towards what you may want them to say. So there's a lot on that topic. It's one of my favorites. It's super important. And in the interest of time, I'm going to keep cranking here. Okay. So one thing to say, so once you do choose that master category, so in this example that I'm showing you right now, air conditioning contractor, you are then given this option to select a bunch of subcategories. But if you don't, it's by default, they're not selected. So you see something like this, very important to go in there and select which ones you want. Could be all of them if it's appropriate, but you might say, no, I don't want to be repairing thermostats. So just click all the ones that are appropriate and not. Again, super important signal about the services you deliver. I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. Sadly, the subcategories in insulation are horrible. And this is a long-standing problem with Google. We've kind of have close relationship with the folks who kind of originally started this whole product. They don't seem to get what insulation contractors do, and they associate the insulation contractors with handymen. And so this is one where you want to be super careful if insulation contractor is in your thing, because you may not want people calling you to mount their TV or to assemble furniture or to clean gutters, right? So there, as you can look at this list, there's not very many great subcategories, but you know, there may be some here that are appropriate in your particular case. So there's this feature in Google My Business called Google Posts. It's kind of like a Facebook post in a way, but it's entirely flexible. So the trick of them is they have a lifespan. In the era of COVID, if you do a COVID message, there's now a particular type of post for COVID that has a longer lifespan, but most of them that are not COVID related expire in 7 days, but you can do kind of anything. You can use it as a link to a blog post. You can put a promotion up. You could put a nice graphic of a recent review that you got. Basically anything goes, and we're finding that these are, you know, these have proven to be quite effective things to do. Something that few people or some people sort of overlook is that there's also Q&A inside of Google My Business. So there's a question and answer thing, and if you're not paying attention, it's not atypical to have somebody having had asked a question that didn't even, no one, it just slipped through, no one knew it was even out there, and no one answered it. But the key thing to know about this is that anybody can answer the question, right? So anybody can ask, and in this case, Jordan, in this example, happens to work for the company, but Mac Gardner, the local guide, is just a guy. He's just out there, and he answers the question and says, the service fee's around $50. Like, who knows if that's accurate? So again, engaging with this is important. It shows engagement. Google loves engagement when they see it, and you can ask yourself questions. So tee up some softballs, and just go to town. So that's not all of Google Q&A, but for purposes of today, that's it. Happy to answer more questions. I didn't really focus too much on reviews, which are a key component of Google My Business. It's where they are, but I'm glad the question came, so Jake, is there anything else on this before I move on, or?
Well, we did have a quick question just about Google My Business in general and Google. Donna asks, when someone calls and says they're from Google, should I believe them? In other words, how do you access Google My Business?
No one from Google will ever call. So when you hear that, you can pretty much rest assured that is some boiler room operation where people are Google and trying to make it sound like it's them. So that there just aren't that many humans as big a company as it is, and it's a huge frustration. But all of those calls that all of you get, and I feel for you because I know what it's like, are very, very rarely. They're from firms of various levels of schlock that are trying to sell you Google My Business services. There's another part to that question that I missed.
How do you basically gain access to your Google My Business?
Okay, let me go back here, and I don't know that it'll show, but so when you see right here, I don't know if you can follow my pointer. If you find your listing, right, and if you have not yet claimed it, right, chances are where this says suggest and edit, there'll be another little link right here that said, is this your business? So that's if you have a listing, you find that you have one, because what Google will have done is just found your company on a directory somewhere out in the internet, and they will have populated it with that. So step one is to click that little link that doesn't show in this particular example, but normally would be there if it's an unclaimed listing that says, is this your business? You'll then be put through a verification process. Sometimes that's a postcard, sometimes it's a phone call, but they do verify that you are you, which is good, obviously. And then that once you get verified, then you get access to the back end, and you can begin to take control of this and populate all the information and take control of your categories and so forth. It's pretty straightforward on the back end, once you get in there. But that's the process. Now, I just want to say, and I'd be happy to assist anybody that may be having trouble with this. Sometimes what happens is that somebody else claimed the listing for you. It was a past employee, can't remember what email address was used in order to access it, and so forth. So there sometimes can be like problems accessing it. We've dealt with every single one of these. I'm not saying it's necessarily easy, but we know the sort of the tricks of the trade to try to get in. So if you do have issues and trouble, let us know, and we can probably help a little bit.
Yeah, and Donna asked another question about kind of the nuances, some of the problems we're finding in the nuances of Google, that Google does not distinguish lighting stores from those who design, specify, and install lighting. So I assume, this is kind of a problem of Google just kind of putting a lot of stuff under the same umbrella, which we see in a lot of ways.
Yeah, or just not having perfect categories, right? It's like the solar thing, up until recently. Solar energy equipment supplier was literally the only category that existed for all of solar, and so an installer is not a not really an equipment supplier, right? So yeah, I'm less familiar with the lighting category, but it doesn't surprise me that there would be. But you've prompted me to go look after this is done and check that out. Again, I would just say it's very often the case with our industry that there isn't, the exact match is just not there. It is typically an HVAC, and it kind of isn't for almost everything else, right? And so I think that the risk here is you choose a more generic category that's maybe too broad for what you really do. You're a lighting designer, but you're not really that's your niche. You probably have to err on the side of the more umbrella term, and then try to present yourself for what you are, so that you don't get a lot of unwanted contacts from the wrong thing.
Cool. Well, that's it. I mean, as far as questions go, that's all that I've got on this end.
Good, because that's only part one. We're going to keep going here. So,
gotcha.
But this is great. I think the questions as we go are awesome. So keep them coming. I next want to talk about search engine marketing, and this is often called Google PPC, pay per click advertising, Google Ads. They used to be called AdWords. There's a product still for this in Bing, and so forth. And so the reason that this is important is that, this is Google's sort of cash cow. This is what drives most of Google's revenue, and because it's so important to Google's revenue, their paid advertising products are increasingly taking up more and more real estate. So when somebody searches, the example here is HVAC repair in Oakland, California, the chance of kind of getting seen organically, meaning by some non-paid product, is increasingly difficult because of how much real estate is being taken up. Stay with me about local services ads if you don't know what those are, because I'm going to talk about those in just a second. But basically, that pink area, which sometimes would be 2 ads, sometimes would be 3, et cetera, is what we're talking about here. Sometimes I hear people say nobody clicks on those ads. So I did the math based on their Google's earnings report in the first quarter of this year. So, and the revenue that they reported from their ad product was $375 million per day from Google Ads. So, and YouTube ads too. And so it's just stunning how important these things are. The other thing that's important to know, and one of the reasons that we're advocates of this, is that people who tend to click on Google Ads are doing so because they have intent to purchase that service. So they are searching for the service, they're seeing an ad related to that service, they're clicking through to your website, and consequently, we get the highest conversion. Conversion in this case means I got 100 people to my website, what percentage of them either called by a trackable phone number or filled out a form or did something that could turn them into an actual trackable lead. We get 15, in the case of a bunch of clients over last year, about a 15% conversion rate from paid ads, better than any other tactics out there because of this issue about buying intent. And so it's good. For us, in terms of the companies that we tend to work with, and we mash together a whole bunch of data of a bunch of different clients, 71% of all leads are coming from paid search. So it is by far not only the driver in terms of conversion, but it's also the driver in terms of lead volume. And we tend to put more effort into it because of that commercial intent aspect of it, right? That people are looking for a service, wanting to buy a service, and clicking as a result. There's one of the things that is attractive about Google Ads is you have incredible control over what your ad says, and increasingly the size and the kind of volume of information that you can put into an ad is growing with kind of every passing week. And so, there's an example of, somebody, taking really good advantage of the full set of all the things that you can do, right? In terms of all the information you can use to tell your story. And there's also, and this gets into kind of just how sort of incredible sometimes these products is what they call responsive search ads. And so if you look down below, you can see there's 4 different descriptions and 5 different headlines in terms of how this ad might display. What Google will do in this case is test all of these different combinations and optimize for whichever one is working the best. And so you're a little bit unsure exactly what to say. Should you lead with indoor air quality, or should you lead with energy costs, or you should lead with weatherization and air sealing, the specific things. Using this concept of responsive ads is one way to kind of get it to show exactly what's going to work. So it's pretty phenomenal. The one thing, well, I guess the last thing I want to say about this, because I know folks have tried Google Ads, and many have come to us and said, yeah, we tried it, it didn't work. The primary, it's become incredibly complicated. So the management of Google Ads is sort of it's become a science, and it is not an easy science. But the biggest single mistake that typically happens is sending traffic to a generic page. And so there's all kinds of reasons why that's not good, but the simple reason is if somebody clicks on an indoor air quality related ad, you want them to land on an indoor air quality related page like you're looking at here. And when that happens, when you get that kind of match up to a dedicated, highly relevant landing page like this, that's the big boost of conversion. Many people who try it out try a bunch of different ads, and they might try some in insulation, and they might some in audit and some other categories, send all that traffic to the homepage, and that tends to not be a good ticket to successful conversion. So at the end of the day, it's all about measuring the conversion. So complicated. We've dedicated a full team of 3 folks internally that just do nothing but manage this all the time. It's all kind of, frankly, a lot of it's become over my head, but that's what I wanted to say. I do think, it is, and I go back to what the sort of mountain analogy, which is, if you need leads quickly, and I'll put a caveat on quickly, and come back to that in just a second, Google Ads are probably your best solution to kind of moving the needle in a quick way. Now, the other thing I just want to say about this quickly is that you need to be careful about expecting immediate results. There's the part of the way Google AdWords work is you collect a whole lot of data and you tune and fine tune and twist the knobs. And so it realistically takes a couple of months, sometimes 3 months, to really get up and running. We've had folks that we've been managing their campaigns for 6 years, and they're just so incredibly mature. We know exactly what's working in their particular region and so forth. So it's important to kind of give it a little bit of time. So let me move on to that. I'm going to go quickly through these Google Local Services ads because it's a relatively new product, and it applies primarily to folks in HVAC, a little bit in plumbing. So, but important. So this is what local services ads are. A lot of people call it the Google Guaranteed program, because in order to get into this, be eligible for these ads, you have to go through this Google Guarantee vetting process. Where all of the people on your team who are doing work in a home have to be vetted have to be background checked. So it can be, for bigger companies, it can be a fairly onerous and difficult process. But the key point about this is that these, in terms of prime real estate, Google has given the top of the page to these local services ads. So if you are in a category that, that this is relevant, which is HVAC and plumbing, I strongly recommend that you at least be aware of what's going on with these. The way Google has attempted to differentiate this is by this notion of Google Guaranteed, right? So, and so they've created this little shield, the green shield with a check mark and Google Guaranteed, and it looks, it looks good, right? It looks attractive. It stands out when you see it. The reality is that it's up to a $2,000 lifetime guarantee. And the reality is for most of us in HVAC, the guarantee you have as a normal course of doing business is probably better. And so, that's a charge from me to if that's the case, to communicate what your guarantee is and so forth. But this is kind of what stands out. Wanted to quickly point out, this is the thing that showed up literally like in the last week, is that suddenly this idea of Google Guaranteed may start becoming available to folks who are not necessarily participating in the local services ads. And so this is an offer that's getting made inside of the Google My Business dashboard, and they're offering you for $50 a month. If you go through the process to get Google Guaranteed, you'll get their little symbol. Hard to know, whether $600 a year is going to be worth it. But I just wanted to point that out because this is a good example of the level of constant change that's going on. So just to be clear about how these products work, this is like Home Advisor in the sense that you pay on a per lead basis. So it's not like a Google search ad where you pay on a per click basis. In this case, you pay when you get the lead. You can see the sort of cross section of pricing that happens around the country. I don't think there's a Vermont thing on here particularly, but basically it's in the $22 to $29 range is kind of where things typically have been. And at the moment, no guarantee that it'll stay this way. These are exclusive leads. So if you get it and pay for it, it's not going to others at the same time, but that could easily change. The thing I want to just mention is that, there's a lot of positive about this. To only pay when you get a lead is sort of, there's an attractiveness to that, et cetera. What we have found is that, this product sort of tops out very, very quickly. So this is, 4 examples where we were willing, based on our approval by our clients to spend, somewhere in the kind of $25,000, $24,000, $50,000 a year for these leads. And what actually happened, even though we were prepared to spend that much money, is that the amount that got spent was radically less. So the point here is that there is a limitation probably in how many leads you could count on from this. It's not going to be kind of your lead horse, if you will, but it's there. And sorry about the fire engine. He shall pass here momentarily. You have the capability to use these subcategories. You may have noted that these subcategories in the local services ads are the same as in Google My Business. So make your choices as to which ones you particularly want. So that's that. Again, and folks may have some experience with this and have tried it. If so, chime in, weigh in. But our general counsel is it's worth trying, and as long as you are comfortable going through that process of getting your company certified or approved in the Google Guarantee thing, and it's worth playing. A lot more to talk about, but not enough time today. Okay, I want to talk about video, and I'm making a distinction here between video production and video marketing, because a lot of us have figured out the process of how to create more video, right? We carry these things in our pocket all day long that do a darn good job of producing really high quality video. And the world doesn't have such great expectations anymore of of super high production values. And so many of us are producing a lot more video content. The distinction, I think is said pretty well by this company, Wistia, that we use for video hosting. Video marketing is strategic marketing approach, involves creating and sharing with the goals of attracting, retaining, and converting a defined audience of viewers. Many marketers know they should be using it, but they often create video content simply to check off the box. So this discussion is really about, if you're going to go through the extra effort of creating video, how do you go the next step to make it, to get more exposure? Often we start with a website, right? It's good content for our website. It has a lot of work, but a really comprehensive video strategy is using video throughout all kinds of different things: Facebook advertising, Google, YouTube advertising, et cetera. And I'll talk more about all of that. There's lots of different types, right? Brand, maybe video, this tells your story. There's the description of your services. There's things that would show your level of expertise, you doing, thermography or doing a blower door test or whatever it is. So many things in our world are complicated and misunderstood by homeowners. So the world of an explainer video that walks people through things, case studies, customer testimonials, there's all manner of them. It can be the lead thing on your website, that fundamentally tells the story of who you are, more of a brand oriented. A lot of our folks have put a special message on about COVID, and it's been this one in particular, which is a California client of ours, has gotten just a lot of, it's got that video has been watched a whole lot. It's on the homepage. We tested this one where we stuck a video in versus a still image, and this is a video testimonial. Massive increase in conversion rate. And often, as I said, like so many things that we do, demand explanation, and heat pumps are a terrific example of this. How does a heat pump work for cooling, right? And so there's all these kind of different types. When you sort of want to, step out into the world of getting more exposure and getting some eyeballs for them, YouTube advertising is kind of one option. So you all kind of, and this is the main one that is typically utilized here, is what's called pre-roll, right? You all know what this is. If you're ever watching a YouTube video and you see this little, ad come up that's skippable, right? It has to play for 3 seconds. So a huge battle here is to have a really compelling first 3 seconds so people stick with it. And then, of course, video is really a powerful thing in Facebook, which I'm going to talk more about in just a second. So what I wanted to do is just share a little bit, and I won't go into too much detail on this chart, but the bottom line is that when you use advertising medium, you can just really massively increase the number of people that see these things. So, line one is if you just put a company story up, you might get 30 views a month. You do an explainer video, put a little bit of effort into that with paid search, you might get 200 views a month. You put sort of a whole portfolio of videos across your whole site, they might add up to 100 views a month. But if you start to put some money into Facebook and Instagram, some money into YouTube, and I put some real numbers in here, you see the giant boost you get. For $50 a month on Facebook, you can get 4,122 views. For $152 a month in YouTube, you can get 7,243. So I'm not saying that views is the only metric, right? But it's an important metric. It's one of the reasons why you would do video. And but then you start looking at what that means from a cost per view standpoint. You're talking about a penny or 2 pennies. So fairly short investment to get things, to get a lot of views out there. It's important to be thinking about the creation of video in a modular way. So the example here is, you've got a 1:30 kind of epic masterpiece that's about whatever it is, you need to shrink that down to 15 seconds, maybe for a Facebook ad, to, to even shorter for a YouTube ad, to really capture that first kind of 3-second look to get people to stick to it, et cetera. So the idea here is to, think that through and to be very modular. I'm going to go next to Facebook and just acknowledge, here we are in the waning days of the Facebook boycott. A number of advertisers and Energy Circle had chose to participate in the boycott on behalf of our own use of Facebook. So very much torn about this. It's there's a lot of problems with Facebook. Personally, I have personally a lot of problems, and yet, for the reasons I'm going to describe here, it is a potentially very, very effective means of doing it. Facebook ads are just like, mostly posts in Facebook that have that little sponsored thing. They can be video, they can be still, they're very easy to create. You don't need, need fancy graphic artists to do it. They're pretty straightforward. There are really two main types. So many of you probably have this idea of boosted posts. You put a post out on Facebook and they say, hey, for $10, do you want to boost this, right? That's one. What I'm mostly talking about now are two types of targeted ads. One is either targeting ads to people based on things that they're interested in, either interest, behavior, or demographics, or to target them based on this idea of a custom audience. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. So there's all kinds of placement options, the news feed, the Instagram feed, the marketplace. You can even get, you can even put advertisements in the Facebook Messenger, lots and lots of different choices. Very important to go back to this conversion chart, because a lot of people wade into the Facebook thinking that they're going to get the kind of performance that they get from Google paid ads, when they're not. So on a good day, we might be getting these kinds of numbers, almost 3% conversion. Think of the environment, right? As I said before, when people click on people go searching for a service, they click on an ad, their commercial intent is there in paid search. In Facebook, it's in your stream, right? It's another advertisement that's kind of passing through. So you want to think of it as an awareness building medium first and a conversion medium second, right? Think of it as the billboard that if your state had billboards, and I'm glad Vermont doesn't, but it's the billboard that you only show to the exact audience you want to show it to. I'll skip over that. So the targeting is incredibly precise, and I just wanted to point out that some of you remember the Cambridge Analytica thing, and a number of the targeting options that we used to use got taken away as a result of that. Things like basically economic data about people, and particularly home data about their homes. But it doesn't mean that it's no longer effective. And the level of things that you can target is just insane. Like people who are interested in the ASHRAE handbook, people who still have an AOL email address, expectant parents. That's been a powerful, way to target folks interested in healthy home and so forth. So and these are constantly changing. It's never fixed. You never know exactly what's out there. You have to just kind of go experiment. But it's pretty phenomenal. Here's this idea of creating a custom audience. So one way to do so, not the only way, is to use your mailing list. So you've got a mailing list of 500 people. You upload that list. Facebook does a matching exercise within Facebook and says, okay, of your 500, we found 250 of them that match up in Facebook. You can then say to Facebook, show me other people who are behaviorally similar to the people from my list. And that's what Facebook calls a lookalike. And that can massively expand the audience. And just a few examples here, where we started out with an email list, one case about 6,200, the other 3,800, put it up into Facebook, got varying levels of match rate, 50 to 70 is pretty typical. And then when you turn those into lookalikes, you suddenly had audiences of 140 and 350,000 that were, behaviorally similar to, your list, basically your customer base. Pretty interesting. So one of the ways that you might use this, right, and this is, and I just wanted to show kind of a real world example here, and this is the last slide, so I know we're close to time, but hopefully I'll stay around as long as anybody wants to. But here's the way you might do this. So you create a custom audience. Let's say you did the, you did the upload of the list, you did the lookalike thing, you got yourself to a 75,000 person audience. You then ran an advertisement to them, which in this case had a video called "Is Your House Making You Sick?" Right? 10,271 people watched enough of that video to put themselves into another custom audience, right? So we now have taken 75 and turned it into almost a little more than 10. We then showed those people our whole house ventilation video, which I'm about to rename the fresh air ventilation, fresh air system video. And that got watched by 5,762 people. And then we kind of went in for the hook, right? We're looking to try to get a test. And so, we did another advertisement about, of the test. And at that point, you got 2,500 people. And then you go down to the point of lead conversion, which is schedule a healthy home assessment. And so that's, I wanted to kind of finish on that. It's a kind of a cool way to sort of drive people down the funnel. Hopefully I didn't go too fast through that, but it's pretty cool. And again, part of the case for Facebook is that you would be hard pressed in Vermont to spend probably more than maybe $300 or $400 a month on Facebook advertising. Again, keeping in mind that it's not going to drive the kind of leads, but it plays a very important role in the overall mix. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And a little bit over time. Sorry if I used it all up. I'm glad we got some questions early on. Jake, anything on the latter half here?
Yeah, we don't really, I mean, it looked like there was a lot just, kind of how to harness GMB and that seemed to kind of really, seems like that's where a lot of people are planning to start, which is a good place to start. So,
yeah. Well, again, the offer stands. I know how frustrating the troubleshooting within Google My Business can be. We do it all day long, and we've got a connection to people who can make a difference, and we sort of we know the tricks of the trade. So if you're banging your head against the wall, reach out to us and we can help.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for joining us. And thank you to Cooper, John, and Brian for having us on. We did this again last week and this week, and both recordings will be up, I believe, on the Efficiency Vermont website sometime around tomorrow. And this was just a great time. So thanks again, PT, and thank you everybody for joining.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you having me. Thanks to the Efficiency Vermont folks, and carry on. Have a good rest of the summer, and let's hope our world gets back in order.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.